Hello and welcome back to HEMA Fight Breakdowns. Today we're going to be talking about the effectiveness of pommels in armor. I think for the most part, I think a lot of people would assume that pommels would be very effective in armor, given that it's a steel piece of basically rounded ball on the end of your sword, and the sword itself weighs about 2-3 pounds. So you think hitting somebody in the head with a 2-3 pound steel ball would make an effect in armor. But I don't think that it really does. And we're going to watch an exchange that kind of demonstrates that.
Oh, God.
So that's the full thing. And you probably noticed that pommels were pretty much one of the only things that were ever actually landed. If you go back in, there's a possibility that I get this armpit stab here, which basically I sacrifice everything to try to make, but you can't see because of the camera angle. Regardless, the second that happens, my opponent knocks me on the back of the head, basically, with a pommel. And I have to tell you right now, I didn't feel it at all. I basically just felt like somebody pushed me in the head. And the thing is that I think a lot of people don't understand is that they know from either pop culture or just general kind of, D&D type things, they assume that armor is designed to stop these kinds of cutting things like a longsword, but it's not very good at dealing with concussion or concussive blows. And honestly, it's just not true, primarily because that's kind of just not how physics works. In a sense that any piece of armor or protection that is going to protect you from a cut, like a knife or a sword, or just in this case a slightly shaped piece of steel, is going to protect you in the exact same fashion from blunt force trauma. And the reality is that that pommel hitting me on the head didn't hit any harder than swinging that giant lever steel sword would have. I've taken hits to the head from the longsword and from the pommel, and I can tell you that neither of them really do a whole lot. So as we continue this exchange, those sword strikes that I basically catch out of the air with my arm also do not hurt. And it really helps to drive home the point that in reality, the reason that in harness fecting we go for the unarmored areas is really truly because those are the only vulnerable areas. You can do pretty much whatever you want to the rest of these armored areas, and chances are you're not going to do anything about it. It's only once you get into maybe boo hurt or some other HMB, ACL kind of thing where people have massively oversized their weapons for the purposes of harming the other person in the armor that this even becomes possible. But to finish out the rest of the exchange, one thing I wanted to point out as well is that as I try to pommel this person repeatedly in the head and they straight up don't notice while pushing me out of the ring, I do realize what the pommel of the sword is good for, which is wrapping around the back of your opponent's head or back and using it as a little piece of leverage to help throw them. Now, if you notice here, another thing that's worth pointing out is that when you're in armor, you're very top heavy, and oftentimes wherever your head or your upper shoulders go, you have to go. And this sort of maneuver, despite the fact that there's not really any leg work happening here, I'm not doing any sort of inside reap takedown or some kind of judo throw, just this much can be more than enough to get someone to throw. And aside from the part where we have to stop because we went out of the ring, my opponent was basically no more than a light shove away from falling over. Alright, so that's going to be it for today. If you would like to see your own footage featured on the channel, feel free to send me an email at HEMAFightBreakdowns@gmail.com. Thanks and have a good one.